We'll have the kickoff. I thought to begin our discussion this morning with a brief. Maybe I need to be closer. Tilt it up. This is the first use of this fancy sound system. Is that all right now? Can people in back here? Still louder? Yeah. I'll talk a little louder too. There's a text I'd like to begin with from the book of Luke. It's a very brief little vignette. The background of it is that Jesus had chosen 70 of his disciples and sent them out on a special mission. And they apparently had a very successful mission because they came back, and this is the report of their return. It says, "So the 70, which he had sent, returned with great joy. And they said unto him, Our Lord, even the demons have submitted to us in your name. He said unto them, I saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Behold, I give you power to tread on snakes and scorpions, and overcome the power of the enemy, and nothing shall harm you. But do not rejoice in this, that the demons submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven." Now, I'd like to start with a question. What does spiritual maturity have in common with Oakland, California? You can't answer if you've peeked, but Joan, do you know?
Is it that there's no there?
How did you get?
Brilliant. Right, there's no there. Some of you may remember that years ago, Gertrude Stein, it was when Oakland was just a bedroom community of San Francisco, had no identifiable city center at all, and she commented that she didn't like Oakland because there's no there. Well, the same may be said of spiritual maturity. We've noticed that many students labor under the belief that there is a destination that they're trying to get to. We call it spiritual maturity or enlightenment, or anyway, there's a there. And when they get there, then they'll be there. And then they'll have no more difficulties, no more trouble with phenomena or ego or anything. They'll be above it all, henceforth and forevermore. Now, some various things happen as a consequence of that belief. Some people get discouraged with themselves or with the path or with their teacher or their therapist. You know, gee, I've been studying 5 years and I'm not there yet. Other people feel that they have to pretend to be somewhere that they think they're supposed to be. And it also gives rise sometimes to the habit of comparing oneself with other people to see who's farther along toward there. And either one feels superior because one is farther along, or one feels envious because somebody else is farther along. So it's kind of a troublesome idea. And it's possible that spiritual maturity is not a destination that we're trying to get to. And I thought I'd like to share with you this morning for a few minutes some thoughts about spiritual maturity as a direction. It's a direction of looking, or a direction of interest. And the direction we might consider to be spiritually mature, we could say, is looking away from self-values toward life values, or toward what on the human level would be called universal values, or we say existential values or spiritual values. And that direction of looking is the mark of spiritual maturity, whatever the level of actual realization. You don't have to have realized anything particular in order to look in that direction. Now, actually, all of life observably manifests a kind of inherent drive toward fruition, expansion, maturity. The expansion of consciousness and the refinement of values actually belong to human growth and development. And I think this inherent drive, we say life lives to bloom. And we can notice that in the human lifespan, most noticeably at the very beginning with babies and small children. It's just a marvel to see how a baby reaches peak after peak of readiness. And when ready, how a baby or a toddler just delights, just rejoices in manifesting that readiness, in doing whatever they're ready to do, sit or stand or walk or talk. And then, having clearly realized that level of manifestation, how the child delights in moving on to that for which it is newly ready. That's a really remarkable characteristic, the delight with which a baby or toddler moves on to that for which it's newly ready. Unless something happens and it gets stuck, he or she gets stuck. Now, what do you think? What could you get stuck on? What could stop that wonderful unfoldment that we see in babies and toddlers? Does anybody have any thoughts about? What? Parents? Yeah, Roberta.
If the parents start comparing with other babies and thinks their baby is lower than the neighbor's baby, so the child then appears a little less mature.
Comparisons by parents. Okay, well, actually, let's take a look at the toddler. See, what is all of this activity for? The baby sits to stand and stands to walk and walks to run and runs to see and sees to learn and learns to understand, and it goes on. And all of it's really just pure manifestation. Just pure showing forth the nature of life as an unfoldment, growth, this drive to blooming. Unless and until selfhood and its false issues comes into the picture. It's interesting the parents were mentioned because it struck me as I was writing this, it seems so clear this is all just manifestation. And then I thought, but of course the parent, none of it is for the child really. And therefore the child may have it all and use it freely. But the parents, of course, think it is for the child, and they think the child's for them. And so there's difficulty. But actually, the snag point is the sense of self. And Polly Behrens, in her new edition to Whole Child, Whole Parent, has a lovely little vignette that illustrates this problem. She says, at 1 year old, he came so fresh from his nap, all new and warm and flushed, smiling bright and lovable with cherry red lips and fat folds over his wrists. Still leaning too far forward, he toddled forth pell-mell to see what was next. We thought his entry so spectacularly cute that one day somebody jovially announced it with a cry of, ta-da! It was even cuter when he took to saying ta-da himself. We liked it that he thought of himself as a good thing worth a little fanfare. But when he was in his high chair and couldn't leap into the room himself, he would hurl other things. Spoon, food, cup, dish across the room, gleefully crying, ta-da! And waiting for everyone to be pleased. For a time there, we were all leaping about because every time he said ta-da, we knew something was going to get thrown. It was harmless, humorous, inevitable, but looking back, we could see. He came from his sleep to see what's what, and we said to him, "You are what's what." One confusion leads to another. When we think we are what's what, instead of life being what's what, then we're sure to get snagged. And the freedom of the unfoldment is going to get interrupted. Because, you see, then instead of looking to see what's what, we look to see who's who. Who's who in America? Who's who in business? Who's who in metapsychiatry? The problem is called self-confirmatory thinking. May be familiar to some of you. See, when we think we are what's what, then anything that seems to confirm us in some way, positively or negatively, we get hooked on. And it interrupts this natural, joyful unfoldment and refinement. Dr. Hora has pointed out that self-confirmatory thinking is actually circular. He says circling around its hypothetical center. The image that came to mind was of a kind of black hole in consciousness that sucks attention and all our mental energy into itself. And unfortunately, the mistaken belief that we are what's what, or that selfhood is what's what, belongs to the human scene. It comes with the territory. We all of us come equipped with that mistaken idea, or we probably wouldn't come into this seeming world of body selves at all. But we also come equipped with something else. Dr. Hora calls it a faculty of awareness. He says when we start studying metapsychiatry, we discover that there are other dimensions to life, and then we gradually awake to the faculty of awareness, that is, spiritual discernment. The word discernment refers to a capacity to separate reality from unreality. Now, in the beginning, then, we don't discern the difference, the unreality of selfhood and material existence and the reality of spiritual substance. Actual discernment takes many years or many lifetimes. And it comes only in momentary glimpses. For a long time, we're mostly taking somebody else's word for it. And yet, even at the beginning, there is a difference between the seeker and the non-seeker. And that difference is the direction of looking that we're calling spiritual maturity. See, having heard that self is not what's what, and that life is what's what, that spirit is what's what, there is in a spiritually mature consciousness a readiness to move beyond personal concerns, a kind of hungering and thirsting after the spiritual scene. Those of you, and there are many of you probably who've spoken to a group of people about existential or spiritual issues, you will have probably noticed the same thing, which is that there's always a couple of people who want to argue about it. Then there's the majority who are polite and somewhat interested, but they don't really get the heck of it. And then there's always one or two whose response is, "How wonderful. Tell me more. Where can I learn more?" And that's spiritual maturity right at the beginning. See, they're already looking beyond self, so that the minute something beyond self, something true is presented, they rejoice in it. Now, the dialogue between Jesus and the 70 that we started out with is a very instructive dialogue. Here's the cream of the crop, probably. We can assume these 70 must have been Jesus' most real...
Research associates.
What? Research associates. Right, the 70 research associates. And they were sent out on a very specific and important mission to manifest the nature of the kingdom of God through their presence, to heal and preach. And they had very specific instructions, and apparently it was a wonderful success because they came back just thrilled. And they made this statement, "Our Lord, even the demons have submitted to us in your name." And we can imagine, we can understand how thrilled they must have been. You see, to act, not only to discover, but to actually exercise the power to dispel negative phenomena from human experience, to actually heal. Most of us would consider that really the pinnacle of spiritual realization. Actually, I think probably most of us, if we're really honest, that's what we're about. That's what we aim for, is to reach a point where we have power over the demons, where we can heal ourselves, our kids, our loved ones, of the problems and the sufferings that human life involves. So we can imagine that they were euphoric, just thrilled about it. Now, Jesus' response is a little bit mystifying, actually. First, he makes this rather strange statement, "I saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven." And then he goes on to say, in effect, "Look, I give you power over every seemingly harmful thing. You're safe. But don't get hooked on the power issue. There's something more important. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven." Now, for many, many years, this text was a mystery to me. And I think it was because having power over the demons seemed such a clearly good, substantial, wonderful thing. But this having your name written in heaven didn't mean much. It seemed rather vague. I now can see that that's because power over demons is still a self-issue. It's a self-value. The only selves know demons. The self, by definition, is helpless and vulnerable and consequently preoccupied with power, getting power, having power, wielding power. It's interesting to observe in our own ordinary lives the way this manifests. For example, the favorite TV series, The A-Team.
They don't know that.
I'm sure none of you watch it. I don't watch it
Hora
either.
doesn't know it.
Every week I don't watch The A-Team. But I was struck when the first couple of episodes.
That's research.
Yes, it's research. John's right. It's research.
What's the name?
Research.
The 18 team.
I was struck with the surge in my own consciousness of sheer gratification when the A-Team comes in and wipes out those dirty, rotten demons. And it's purely the issue of power over demons. And it made me realize how much a part of the self's view of things, this hunger to have power over all the bad guys, the bad things, is. And it not only shows up in TV, but actually everywhere. Human endeavor, all of medical science, all of psychiatry, all the human endeavors are these desperate attempts to have dominion over the demons, whether the demons are germs or mental illnesses or anything. We're preoccupied with that. The famous statement by Reinhold Niebuhr, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." I'm sure that it's always been so It's so oft repeated because it's so much our own experience. Being powerless is so awful that getting power is just unbearably delicious to a self. So it's a very self-confirmatory thing. So Jesus, first of all, makes clear to the disciples that power over demons does not in any way confirm selfhood. It isn't their power. He says, I give it to you. But moreover, he makes it clear that it isn't what it seems to be either. He doesn't say, yeah, I saw you guys clobbering the demons. He says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. See, what he saw was the seeming power of evil unmasked as a fraud. It isn't way up there, some big deal at all. What he saw was the unreality of the seeming power of the demons. And that, what he saw was a consequence of spiritual seeing. And spiritual seeing comes from spiritual looking. And so he says to the disciples, don't pay so much attention to the drama, the seeming drama of the power and the demons. Focus your attention on the real good, the reality, which is the truth of spiritual identity. See, the self issue is see what we can do, and the life issue is see what we are. The truth of the matter is that we are made of a spiritual substance, and our situation is the situation of spirit and not the situation of a self at all. Now, there's a very crucial understanding here, which is the mark of maturity not only for individuals, but also for metaphysical and religious groups and systems. The distinction between self-operational values and life existential values makes a great difference. A man named John Hargraves wrote this. He said, consciousness freed from ignorance means experience freed from limitation. But let us remember that the human appearance is but the illustration and not the substance. All that is really true of anything is what God knows of it, and that is wholly spiritual. The illustration is safe in our experience to the extent that it is incidental to our real purpose as spiritual students, which is to know the truth as God knows it. That's a little bit a pithy statement. Did everybody get that? The human appearance is just an illustration, a picture of a substance, which is the spiritual substance. And that picture is only going to be safe in our experience to the extent that we're not interested in it, or at least that we're more interested in the substance. So Jesus counsels the disciples not to be so interested in the appearances of power and of safety, which are just the illustrations of spiritual identity, but rather to focus their attention on beholding the spiritual identity itself, because that's the real good. And individuals or groups which get preoccupied with trying to make the substance, spirit, God, serve self-interest, make a mistake. And that mistake will cost them not only the seeming powers on the human level, but also the possibility of real spiritual growth and realization. You can't look in the direction of self without putting your consciousness in the field of gravity of self-confirmatory thinking, and the centripetal force just sucks everything into self-concerns then. Only spiritual maturity can keep unfoldment flowing, because spiritual maturity loves spiritual reality for itself and not for what it can do for selfhood. And also, only spiritual maturity can keep the spiritual quest joyful. His self-concerns make any quest, even the spiritual one, a drag. For one thing, the self is always a child in a world of adults. And this perspective louses things up right from the beginning. We tend to hear statements of truth as shoulds, parental injunctions. And we fall unwittingly then into interaction thinking in relation to other students and in relation to our teacher or therapist and even in relation to God. And end up trying to compete with other people for some kind of reward from guru or from God. Because our interest, if it's a self-interest, is really in getting something for ourselves. And without realizing it, we end up studying spirit for a secret self-purpose. That is, getting a personal reward of some sort, instead of just for love of spirit itself. And naturally, that makes for a tremendous amount of frustration and distraction. One man told me once, I used to have an office and it was at the end of a long hallway. And this fellow later told me that every time he followed me down this long hallway from the waiting room to my office, he felt just like a naughty child being led to the principal's office. And he had to pay a fee, too. That's what self does. I mean, that's a drag. That's a drag. Now, many students complain at times something along this line. It seems like the harder I try to be a good student, the worse things get. Has anybody ever felt like that? Now, it's interesting. If you look at that, you see that what you really feel like a child, a dutiful child, who's been doing the right thing and not gotten the promised reward. Now, actually, the disciples were involved in the flip side of that. They thought the reward was great. Yeah, boy, it really does work. Look what we can do. But whether we feel unrewarded or rewarded is a problem. You see, reality is not a reward for our trying to be good illusions. We're not doing somebody a favor by awakening to the truth of being. So if the spiritual quest is going to be joyful, we need to come to it not as children trying to get something from a mom and pop God or a mom or pop guru, but as living souls, loving to know the truth because it's true. Now, it's not only the infantile perspective of selfhood which renders the path joyless. Dr. Hora has pointed out that the self's question is always Mayor Koch's question. How am I doing? See, that's really what looking in the direction of self means. It means this chronic secret questioning. How am I doing? How am I doing? And of course, always evaluated in terms of what the self says the situation is. And the result is that selves come very grudgingly to spiritual realization. I think it was that famous Christian writer C.S. Lewis who described himself being dragged, kicking and screaming into the kingdom of heaven. Most of us have that feeling about it sometimes. No, take away the pearly gates. No. See, the self's question corrupts our looking. Realization becomes something I'm trying to do, and spirit becomes something I should be interested in. And I'm always judging myself, I'm evaluating myself, whether I'm interested in what I should be. And at the same time, always having to defend myself against the presumed judgments of others about how I'm doing. And of course, also for selves, any change, even if it's a desired change, is difficult. It's painful. And it's the self's inevitable attachment to anything that confirms it. And it makes spiritual growth seem hard. Selves are unable to rejoice in readiness often. They insist on hanging around until they get kicked out. They can't graduate. They have to kind of hang around until to that which has proven itself to be an ego good. grieving over the sense of loss, which comes from the idea that it has to give up something. Many students ask many times in different ways, what am I going to get for what I have to give up? Or actually, in a more crudely put on a bumper sticker I saw recently, how much sin can I get away with and still get into heaven? Well, I think it helps to see that the sense of loss doesn't come from spiritual growth at all. It just means that at that moment we're thinking like a self. See, if we insist upon being attentive to the question, how am I doing, we will find spiritual studies difficult and dreary. But if we refuse to look in that direction, and we turn instead to look and see how life is doing, if we look to see what's what, then that whole burden is just lifted. See, if you're looking to see light and you see it, you don't struggle with giving up the darkness, and you don't grieve over its loss. So looking to see what's what, we become free, like the toddler, to delight in our readiness, to move ahead and leave the old garbage behind. So spiritual maturing shows up in an increased enjoyment of and gratitude for spiritual study. There's less and less tendency to wait, to be grudgingly motivated by the bamboo poles of life. All right, I'm moving. And there's also less and less tendency to talk the words and think the concepts, but secretly resist the realizing of it, the living of it. You know, when I point out to one of our boys a task agreed upon but not done, their response is often, I know. To which I am often moved to reply, how can I tell?
Tommy is on the spot.
Gotcha.
Poor guy.
One mother was told a story about one evening at bedtime when one of her children suddenly had a fever and a very red sore throat. And she was used to going immediately to the doctor, although she was a spiritual student. But here it was bedtime, and you parents know that bind. Here it is bedtime, and suddenly the child is sick. And, well, all of a sudden, this mother felt a surge of rebellion, and she got really mad about what she put being toyed with by carnal mind. Suddenly at bedtime, here's this scary symptom. And she got mad, and she thought, doggone it, now I know enough of spiritual truth to at least stand up to this thing. I don't have to just fall apart and have a terrible night. And this time I'm just going to stand up to it. And she did. She really forcefully turned to look in the direction of spirit and maintained it. The child slept through the night, and the next morning, perfectly healthy. And she was very surprised. But instead of her consciousness being flooded with relief and gratitude, she found herself suddenly anxious. And the thought popped into her mind, does this mean I can never go to a doctor again? You see the problem? See, the night before, in rebellion against the demons, she turned to spirit and stood up, and the demons submitted, amazingly quickly. But the issue stayed on the level of power over demons, on the level of self's concerns, and that leaves you always precarious. Sure, I could do it last night, but what if it's a scarier demon? What if it's cancer instead of a sore throat? Or what if I don't feel good, I can't do it? That's the self's question, how am I doing? And because of that, instead of the joy and the peace that belonged to that wonderful moment of healing, she was left anxious again. Now, it's never too late. That is, all she would need would be to realize that her inability to rejoice in this clearly wonderful thing simply indicates she's looking in the wrong direction. She could just realize this absence of rejoicing and say to herself, well, how silly. I could be rejoicing that my child's name is written in heaven. I have evidence of it even. And here I sit, all anxious, all nervous, just because I'm asking the self's question. So when we're stuck, and we all have all these moments, when we're disturbed, or we're perturbed, or we're turbed in any form whatsoever, really, it just means that at that moment we're refusing to rejoice that our names are written in heaven. And I found as this the ideas for this paper began to unfold, I found this began to happen more and more. Every time I was fretting about something, the thought would come, I could be rejoicing. Now, it's very hard to go on complaining and worrying when it has come to mind that there's this other alternative. So that it becomes a kind of a spiritual discipline. It's a kind of a fresh way to come at the old garbage. Every time you're upset, say about your kids or with your kids, you can say, I could be rejoicing that their names are written in heaven, instead of sitting here wondering what's wrong with them and what to do about it. Every time there's any kind of seeming discord or difficulty, it can come to mind. I could be rejoicing. There's only one mind. All of our names are written in heaven. Try it. You'll like it. It becomes a kind of a spiritual discipline then. It also came to mind, as I was pondering this issue of rejoicing, that the problem with the reformed alcoholic, AA insists that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And it occurred to me that perhaps the meaning of that is simply a failure to rejoice in the healing of the alcoholism. You see, a reformed alcoholic begrudges his sobriety. See, he thinks he would like to drink, but can't. From the self's point of view, the self says, you've lost something that was good. It was troublesome, but it was good. And the cultural definition of a cure doesn't help, because the cultural definition says a cure would mean that you could drink again. You'd be, quote, free to drink again, moderately. But a real healing would mean freedom from any desire to drink alcohol. And if the reformed alcoholic, instead of looking and asking the self's question, could look in the direction of life and growth and blooming, he could rejoice in the freedom from enslavement to anything on the material level. And in the rejoicing, there would be complete freedom. There would be a healing. See, maturity really is inevitable for everyone. That which we are makes it impossible to cling everlastingly to the less than good. The pain of self-confirmatory thinking and concerns is rooted in this pressure of reality to manifest. Our names are written in heaven. That's the truth of it. And the closer we come to seeing that, really the harder it is to ignore, and the more painful the consequences of ignoring. It's like a door that's closing, and if you don't let go, your fingers get pinched. But spiritual maturity doesn't wait to be compelled by pain or ambushed by truth. It rushes onto the scene moment by moment, like the toddler. Fresh, wide-eyed, running pell-mell to see what's what. The second of metapsychiatry's two intelligent questions then impels our looking. What is what really is, we ask in rapt attention, loving, absolutely loving to receive the answer. Spiritual progress, says Dr. Hora, comes to us by grace, faster or slower, depending upon the passion with which we are facing this gift of God, the intensity of our devotion. Thank you.
Beautiful. I've never heard that before. The last word. We have a few minutes for questions before we take a break. Anybody who wants to ask a question can raise the hand, and Bill will hand out a microphone to them. That might be a good way that everybody can hear the question that way. Maybe you can walk into the aisle, Bill.
And if you have no questions, you can give us some answers.
So, Rick?
Is the recognition that our names are written in heaven basically then the recognition that our identity is love?
You could say it that way, or that we are spiritual beings, living souls for love.
Does that mean then, when he said, in my name, or he used that expression, that that name was not his name, but that of love?
Yeah, I think the in my name, or I give you the power. They said actually in his name, and he said, "Behold, I give you." I think it was simply clarifying, right, that the power is not a personal power. That's right.
I remember reading once that name meant nature. So would that clarify it? In my nature, in the nature of
Yes,
the
yes,
spiritual
Claudette.
identity.
Right. That's useful. Yes. That's right. And then our names being written in heaven means that heaven is our nature and our situation. It's our identity. Yes, thank you.
Like this paper was so wonderful and exhausting that
Everybody's worn out.
we are all bowled over and left speechless.
Maybe it's time for a break.
Not only questionless, but speechless.
Yes, Sister Elsie.
Well, I guess I would just like to make a response at how embarrassed I am to realize I've come here to ask how I'm doing in metapsychiatry. So I'm not, it's not so much speechless, I'm just sitting here being embarrassed. But delighting in that there's more than that.
Yes. Now, I would like to ask a question. If there is no there,
You have to be close to the
if there is no there, then what are we left with? And perhaps there is a, beg your pardon?
They can't hear you.
You can
Still need you closer.
closer to the microphone.
if there is no there, now that's a frightening prospect. If we reach out for something that cannot be in any way touched or grasped or defined, or not even put into approximate words, just in symbolic language, like your name is written in heaven, For years, for years it seemed to me this is some frivolous. Is there a celestial bookkeeping system? Or do they keep track of us with computers? Yeah, so you see, these utterances of the Bible are of necessity very mysterious. I guess that's why it is called a mystical teaching, because language fails us, and it cannot be imagined. You cannot draw a picture of it. You cannot measure it. There is no there, which means it is a non-dimensional reality, which we must realize somehow. And sometimes one has an impression that what is required is a total annihilation. The personality has to accept total annihilation. It's sort of realizing you cannot figure it out. You cannot be smart about it. There's nothing to sink your teeth into it, right? So there's this phrase, there is no there. There is a great challenge. Of course, religions have, the various religious denominations have tried to get by with this problem by saying that if you just observe the 10 Commandments and go to Mass and be a good boy, then by the grace of God, you are going to know. If not in this life, maybe in the next life. Or after you die, there will be a pie in the sky. Now, metapsychiatric research has led us to a point where we have to face what the existential philosophers spoke about for many years, the dread of nothingness. A fear of total annihilation and dissolving into sort of emptiness, like the Zen masters speak about, the sunyata emptiness. And what will happen to us then? So, would you answer You see, we have been sort of impelled to define this reality as non-dimensional. But this very word boggles the mind, because the illusory mind of man cannot possibly grasp what non-dimensional means. Even the Zen masters don't grasp it. They say it's nothing. Now, what's so great about nothing? This kind of non-dimensional nothingness is the greatest that can be, because it is pure wisdom and love and constant flow of creative intelligence, which makes it possible to live harmoniously in a world full of tribulation. Okay, Anne? You have something to add?
They're doing fine.
So all that metapsychiatry asks of you is to dissolve into pure love intelligence and realize that it is not you, but it is God in you. And when Jesus said, I am in the Father and the Father is in me, this kind of statement requires a great deal of contemplative meditation and confrontation with our habitual ways of thinking.
I have always found that your definition of reality in terms of spiritual values, I've always found that a most useful concept, because the values are unimaginable and non-dimensional, and yet they are somehow tangible to human consciousness at any level of realization. That is, we don't, even without, I remember one lady who'd had a very unhappy interpersonal life all her life, and she picked up a birthday card once that was written to somebody, and the birthday card had all the spiritual values: grace, love, peace, joy. It was, the wish was for happy birthday, and she looked at this and she gasped and she said, I've never known any of those in my life. And what was striking about that was that even though she had never known any of those, she clearly could see they were valuable. And if she could have known how to go from there, she could have realized them. But they are so wonderful because we can love them and we can look in that direction, even if we don't know what that means. Love is still beautiful and good. Bill, where's the?
If the there is not there, and there's nothingness, then what is the purpose of consciousness?
Now, Carol, repeat it. If the there is not there, and what?
If there really is no there, and there is nothing, then what is the purpose or the meaning of consciousness?
Well, the meaning of consciousness is being conscious, or is awareness. And when I say there's no there, I mean it in a specific sense, obviously. The meaning of it is that that is more speaking to our situation as students who think, gee, I'm not okay, or I'm not doing good because I'm not there yet. If I could get there, then things would be better. Consciousness, the meaning of it is awareness, and we are, moment by moment, able to be aware of non-dimensional reality. But we need to look in the direction of non-dimensional reality. If consciousness is to be liberated from the force of self-confirmatory thinking enough to be aware. Does that clarify?
You say that there is no there to the ego.
That's a good way of saying it. There's no there for the ego to get to.
I was trying to understand the meaning of heaven in the context of that statement from the Bible, and it seems that heaven is a there. In non-dimensional terms, it's the place where spiritual qualities and ideas and values are. And so that becomes the there, rather than a ego there or a physical there.
And there is already here. You're just not looking at it.
Heaven is not a geographical location. It is the quality of spiritual good.
I was reminded of something that was said in Hawaii that I think is appropriate here too. If there's no there, it helps us this morning to be here. And Dr. Hora asked us at the Hawaii conference, what is the best way to be here? And it was said that attention is the best way. So that I think Anne has helped us to be attentive, and that this is a wonderful beginning for our conference.
We will take a break now, a brief break, about 10 minutes, and we proceed.